From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's ahead. K-State's Bill Schapaugh will provide an update on several approaches by the university's soybean variety development program in generating new and improved soybean lines for you growers. Among those, an attempt to dramatically speed up the breeding process using genomic selection to predict yield and seed protein performance. Also, from the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen will be with us to take a look at the tax implications of demolishing farm structures that were irreparably damaged by last week's massive windstorm across Kansas and the Central Plains. And K-State's Gus van Der Hoeven stops by with another commentary on life in rural Kansas. All that straight ahead on Agriculture Today. Welcome once more to another Agriculture Today. Well, our next few moments are for you soybean producers, for we'll provide you a good update on the Soybean Variety Development Program here at Kansas State University. As we ease out of 2021 and into 2022, we welcome back over soybean breeder, K-State Department of Agronomy, Bill Schapaugh. Bill, want to pass along some of the areas of emphasis that you have going in your soybean breeding program. You have at least 3 areas that you're trying to focus on here.
I thought we'd try to highlight a few things that we've been working on for at least a couple of years. In one case, we've finished the trials and have some definitive results. Others are in various stages of progress. But I thought it'd be interesting for listeners to have an idea of the types of things that we're working on and how we're trying to contribute to the genetic improvement of soybeans, not only in Kansas, but throughout the United States.
And one of them you describe as rapid cycling. To what does that refer?
Okay, well, we're trying to speed up the breeding process. And we're doing that by using genomic selection to predict the performance of that particular plant, that particular variety. And we're focusing on seed yield, obviously very important. We're also focusing on seed protein, and we're focusing on seed protein because as our yield levels are going up, our seed protein levels are creeping downward. We want to at least maintain that protein level so that when you have a soybean product that's going into the market, it can produce a 48% protein meal. So let's kind of contrast what we're trying to do in this rapid cycling with what we normally do. Mm-hmm. In a typical variety development program, we select varieties to use as parents, and then we hybridize, we cross-pollinate the parents to try to produce new progeny that have new combination of traits that are superior to the varieties that we have. And in that development process, those new progeny are selected over a period of several years. And the selection criteria is primarily based on field evaluations or greenhouse tests, say, for example, for disease resistance or something.
And it takes quite a bit of time, actually.
Absolutely. In our program, that entire process that I'm describing takes 7 or 8 years, from the start of the selection of the parents to the final evaluation, the last evaluation of those progeny, where you can make a decision on whether or not you would release it or as a variety or release it for people to use as parents to produce more progeny. But in the rapid cycling experiments, here's what we do. We first grow the progeny, and then shortly after emergence, we will take leaf tissue. We will collect DNA from each plant, each variety, each genotype that we're sampling in the population, and we'll use the information from that DNA to predict the performance on yield and protein. Once we have that information, a few weeks later, those plants are going to be flowering. And we will go in and we will decide which of the plants that are flowering we're going to hybridize. We're going to cross-pollinate. And so we select the desirable plants. We cross-pollinate those. Those are going to produce new progeny, okay? And one growing season, they're going to produce new progeny, and we'll harvest those progeny, and that will be the end of one cycle of selection. And then we will plant those progeny again and repeat the process. So we're actually completing one cycle of selection in one growing season.
Well, which is a remarkable acceleration of the process.
Sure, profound. And because soybeans are very photoperiod sensitive, because we have access to winter nurseries and greenhouses, we actually can complete 3 cycles of selection in 1 calendar year. And we've been doing this now for a couple of years. We've been working on this particular project for a couple of years, and we're cooperating with a team of researchers from Ohio State University and University of Minnesota and University of Nebraska to get this all put together, to get things genotyped and for us to do all the intermating and so on. So it's a really substantial team effort. And so now we're ready to find out how effective it's working. So next year, 2022, in our field trials, we will evaluate the progeny from these selection cycles to see how much genetic progress has been accomplished by using this technique. It could dramatically improve our breeding program and other breeding programs around the country.
Anxious to see what the results will be 1 year hence. Excellent start to that work. Of course, you are looking at traits that would benefit Kansas growers in our sometimes harsh conditions, and heat tolerance in soybean varieties is still very much on your radar.
Yeah, certainly. You know, high daytime temperatures and high nighttime temperatures during seed fill negatively impact seed yield potential, negatively impact grain quality. The past growing season last year, we completed our second year of a field study where we're evaluating over 300 genetically diverse soybean varieties. And I call them varieties, but I mean, they're really more technically referred to as accessions. And these accessions are from around the world, primarily from Southeast Asia. They are mostly varieties that have never been used, never contributed to the genetic improvement of soybeans in the United States. And so there's a lot of unadapted as well as adapted material in this diverse set. And we are evaluating them for their response in terms of yield and in terms of seed composition to heat stress during seed fill. And the way that we're doing that is we're using heat tents, which are basically just clear plastic tents that we place over the plots. And those tents, we can control the temperature in them to some degree. But the tents increase the temperature. That imposes a heat stress on the plants. And then we're examining what's happening phenotypically, what's happening to yield, what's happening to protein quality, what's happened to oil, and so on. What's happened to that phenotypic variation in these plants for seed yield and for seed composition in response to this heat stress.
And then your hope from there, once you discover what's happening, is to identify the genetic makeup that could be utilized in future varieties, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, we want to understand the phenotypes, what phenotypes could be used for crossing, hybridization, could be used for parents to produce new progeny, what genes are associated with the beneficial traits, and all of that, the phenotypes and the genotypes will help us develop improved heat-tolerant germplasm. We're working with researchers at the University of Missouri as well to try to pull this all together.
Anxious to see the results of this work, likewise, for the benefit of Kansas growers. And one more area. We talk about the abilities on many levels, many fronts of remote sensing technology, and that is part and parcel of your breeding program now too, Bill. How so?
Correct. I mean, we've been using remote sensing in some form. We started out with handheld instrumentation, and then eventually we moved to drones, and that's what we're primarily focusing on now. The information that we have been able to collect from sensor technology has been informative in terms of yield potential. It's been informative in terms of disease reaction, and so we've learned a lot from it. What we're interested in doing is improving our selection efficiency in the progeny row stage of our breeding program.
And you might explain what you mean by progeny rows.
Okay. Well, in our program, the progeny row stage are short rows. They're only 3.5 foot long in our soybean breeding plot. They're just one plot, and we have literally thousands of these rows, and each row is a different genotype. And each row has the potential to become a new superior variety. But we've got to try to figure that out. But we only have this one little plot to do that with. It's not a lot of information. We're not going to make a lot of genetic gain at this particular stage. And so we've applied remote sensing technology to that particular stage to see if it helps characterize the yield potential of all the material in the field. What we found out is if we went in and used a drone, and we flew a drone over the progeny rows several times during the growing season, starting out fairly early, starting a few weeks after emergence, and then ending a mid-pod fill somewhere in there. And that we collect a lot of sensor information, a lot of spectral data. Okay, and we've made selections then, each of the growing seasons, based on thousands of progeny rows, just based on the spectral data. That is it. And we are quite delighted that we found out that each year, when we compared the selections based on the spectral imagery, what we thought would be the best based on that information, those selections were on average 3 to 4% higher yielding than this random selections out of the population.
That's a significant percentage.
Right. It's not a lot, but it's significant, and that just moves the population mean a little bit in the right direction. And so we're very excited about that, and we plan to use this each and every year in our breeding program, and are now trying to couple this with genomic selection to even further improve our overall phenotypic evaluation of material.
All of that blends together to create successes in the soybean breeding program here at K-State. Bill, congratulations on another successful year. Thanks for the update. Happy holidays to you.
Thank you.
Soybean breeder, K-State's Department of Agronomy, that's Bill Schapaugh. We'll be back with more for you on Agriculture Today. We're back now on Agriculture Today. Well, it's not a distant memory, not whatsoever. Just a week ago today, that vicious windstorm ripping through Kansas caused all manner of devastation in rural parts of the state. Well, an article that our guest has just put on his blog does address an important offshoot of this story, the tax implications of demolishing a farm structure that has been irreparably damaged by a catastrophic weather event. Joining us now, Roger McEowen, Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation, Washburn University School of Law. Roger, you've actually done more than a little research on this topic previously. You pulled together information on the subject last year following that derecho, which hit other parts of the Midwest.
Yeah, Eric, and it's not often that I repeat articles that I write, but this is a very comparable situation to the derecho last summer that went through eastern Nebraska and cut a 50-mile wide swath across Iowa and northern Illinois and into Indiana. And those straight-line winds pretty much wiped out everything in its path. Well, we've got the same thing that happened a week ago and started kind of in Kansas and worked its way through Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, off into Minnesota. And you've got these high winds, and this one spawned numerous tornadoes, but they damage a lot of farm buildings and structures in their paths. And so the article I wrote 16 months ago is very timely for what happened last week, and that is, all right, I've got buildings on my farm, I have structures on my farm that are irreparably damaged. What are the tax rules associated with just simply demolishing those structures and starting over with some new ones?
And the IRS has had a traditional take on that demolition of farm structures, not necessarily tied to a catastrophic event, but in general, has it not?
Yeah, and basically what you do in these types of situations is when you demolish the structure, we start with the principle that you're not going to get a deduction associated with your demolition costs. You're just going to add the cost of the demolition into the basis of the land, assuming that the structures are on farmland that's used in the farming business. So you capitalize those amounts, add it to the basis of the land on which the building was located, and or the structure was located. And you could claim depreciation for the tax year up until the point in time in which the destruction/demolition occurred, and then you take the remaining cost and add it into the basis of the land. That's the general rule, and that's the starting point.
There are other side notes to that. If that building is simply abandoned and not destroyed, that does affect how it's treated as far as basis?
Yeah, if you just abandon it, and we may see that. We've seen, you can still drive through the countryside today and see farm structures that were abandoned 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I always think about, well, I wonder how they handle that from a tax standpoint. I'm not sure too many other people think of those things that way, but there is a rule for abandonment, and that is if a building or structure is just simply abandoned, any remaining basis in that building or structure is treated as a disposition or a sale at a zero price. So what that means is that any remaining income tax basis in that building or structure at the time it's abandoned becomes an ordinary loss that's reported on Form 4797. And if those abandoned structures are then eventually demolished, at least a year after the taxpayer ceased using them in their farming business, then they now have remaining basis, and the only cost of demolition would be added to the land's basis.
Let's center, though, here on what happens after a casualty like this windstorm of last week and how those are treated. If that building is eventually demolished, what are the considerations here as far as, say, casualty loss claims and so forth?
Well, when you have a casualty event that occurs, such as these 100-mile-per-hour winds that created all this damage to farm structures, then the normal capitalization rule under the code that I started with a moment ago when I said the general rule is you have to capitalize those costs, which means add them to the basis in the land. Well, when a casualty event occurs, then your normal capitalization rule does not apply when a structure that is damaged by the casualty is demolished. IRS put out a notice on this 30 years ago, and they said that the capitalization rule doesn't apply to amounts expended for the demolition of a structure that's damaged or destroyed by a casualty and any loss sustained on account of the demolition. Instead, what happens is that the basis of the structure is reduced by the deductible casualty loss before the loss sustained on account of the demolition is determined. So that means that for a farm building or a structure destroyed by these recent winds, the income tax basis in the building or the structure at the time that it was damaged would be deductible as a casualty loss, but then the cost of cleaning up the mess left behind would be capitalized into the land's basis. There was a rule change on that 35, 36 years ago. So your cost of cleanup, you're going to have to add that into the basis of the land. But the basis in the building at the time of the wind damage last week would be deductible as a casualty loss.
In your article, you note that there are some considerations as far as tangible property regulations involved in this. What's the tie-in? Explain that, if you would.
Yeah, this is a real technical point here, and basically this has to do with the method of accounting that the farmer is using, and if they are treating on their books and records a farm building or a structure that has now been damaged, if they had been treating that as a general asset account item, then there are some other rules that can come into play. And really, this is going to be something that the farmer's tax attorney or CPAs are going to have to assist with, because it would be those people that would have set up these structures as a general asset account anyway. And if that's the case, then we've got some special rules that come into play. And it may give you more flexibility in terms of whether you have to add certain costs to your income tax basis in the underlying land or whether you get current deductions. I'll just leave it at that for purposes of our audience, but there is a special rule if you're using general asset accounts, and that's going to be something that your tax practitioner is going to know and would have set things up on your books and records accordingly.
We have folks out there that are still in the midst of cleanup and the physical stress and strain of getting things back in order on their farm or ranch. But these are the kinds of things you think they should be aware of as per their tax consequences, and that folks should be as familiar as they possibly can be with this, you say.
Yeah, it is. I think it's really important to get the best tax result that you keep a good record of what you're doing on a daily basis. So two things: keep a calendar, log in that calendar what you're doing on a daily basis in terms of cleanup, tear down, all those types of things. Because it's time to do your tax prep work, your CPA, attorney, whoever's doing your work for you, your tax practitioner is going to need that information that will help them work their way through the tax rules. The other point I would point out here is as you come down to near the end of the year, if you put a new structure up, you can start to claim depreciation on that in the year that it is available and ready for use in your farming business. Doesn't mean you actually have to use it this year, but if it is available and ready for use, whether you use it or not important, then you can start to claim depreciation on it in 2021 rather than 2022.
Well, again, as you say, that conversation with your tax preparer is paramount in this situation, and you might want to, producers, take a look at this blog article as well, which details all of this out very well on the website. It's entitled Inland Hurricane 2021 version, Is There Any Tax Benefit to Demolishing Farm Buildings and Structures? At washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. You'll find that article. Roger, many thanks. Happy holidays to you and yours as we head into that break, and we will talk again in the new year, undoubtedly about your top 10 agricultural law developments of 2021. Until then, many thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Same to you.
He is Roger McEowen, Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation at the Washburn University School of Law. He's along with us every other Wednesday right here. While we have a second, might just put in a full plug here for the website that Roger maintains beyond just the blogs that he posts there. It's called the Washburn Agricultural Law and Tax Report. That site focuses on legal and tax issues that you agricultural producers, agribusiness folk, and rural landowners often face, some on a daily basis, others might turn up on a more cyclical basis. All of what Roger puts there illustrates how the legal and tax systems here in the U.S. treat agriculture, the family farm, and the farm operation uniquely. Also, for anyone involved in agriculture as a producer, as a consumer, or in the agricultural industry itself, this site will help one identify agricultural legal problems, become acquainted with the basic legal framework surrounding agricultural issues. It's a very dynamic field, and there are loads of articles and media resources on the website to cover it. Check that out if you haven't already, washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. After this break, K-State's Gus van Der Hoeven checks in once more, undoubtedly with some sort of holiday-themed Stop, Look, and Listen. You're tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
I have my memories, and so has my wife.
That's Gus van Der Hoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
Christmas, the holiday season. I have my memories, and so has my wife, Anneke. And yes, we have made our own memories with our children when they were small. And as they grow up, they left the house to start making their own memories with their own families. Different culture will have different memories and different customs. When we lived in Australia, the holiday season was summer and warm, if not plain hot. I remember going to the citrus orchard and picking small oranges to hang on the tree branches and force them to be more horizontal, like I was used to. Also, that long ago, communication was slow. It was all snail mail. No phone calls. The calls we did make were often poor connections. The contact was by mail. Now I can sit near the fire and call up family on the smartphone. I can show them the burning logs in the fireplace and point to the Yule log. And I can listen to what they say. Celebrating Christmas should be easy. It's a celebration. Putting up the Christmas tree is the yearly event. What is under the tree should not matter. That again is culture. And yes, when in Rome, you do what the Romans do. In my youth, Christmas was purely Christmas. We might get a book so that we should be quiet and read. Remember, the Dutch celebrate St. Nicholas. It's often a misunderstood festivity which has nothing to do with Christmas. Nothing. But it is the evening of giving presents. Fun presents, gags are given. Each gift is supposed to have a poem, and everybody is rhyming or trying to. The St. Nicholas celebration is held on December 5th, and as I said, it has nothing to do with Christmas. It's fun with laughter and leg pulling. Christmas is a quiet time. I look forward to getting the tree on the farm together with a Dutch family friend. We look forward to her coming, and she is here. That is part of the celebration. The warmth of sharing and celebrating the season together, making memories. To decorate the tree and handle the well-known ornaments, each carefully unwrapped. But first, we get the tree, allow it to soak overnight and place it on the old, homemade stand. Once standing secure, I will walk around it to shape it. Of course, coming from the farm it is a cedar. But by the time I shape it, you will see the Christmas tree it is going to be. The scent will give it away. But we love it. It will be freshly cut and standing in water. Sometimes I cut one with an old bird's nest in it. Very special. Our Dutch family will help decorate. Decorating the tree is special. And when the lights are turned on, I'll step back and, as always, look at it with partly closed eyes. And the lights will shimmer, as they always do. Happy Christmas to you and yours.
Gus van Der Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. Our time's away once more, as always. Thanks to you for being along with us. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.